Schiphol Airport looked calm on a cold January afternoon in 2021, while travelers dragged suitcases past cafés without noticing Dutch officers quietly forming a circle near Gate D. Inside that quiet movement stood Tse Chi Lop, a middle-aged man who calmly placed his palms against a wall while police secured handcuffs around his wrists. Most people walking past that hallway assumed officers stopped another traveler with paperwork trouble, yet investigators from Australia, Thailand, Japan, Canada, plus the United Nations knew something much larger just collapsed. For almost 2 decades, authorities believed this same quiet figure helped manage a syndicate that moved billions in methamphetamine throughout the Asia-Pacific region. Street people inside the underworld called him Brother Number 3. Though detectives chasing his network across continents understood the story stretched far deeper than one airport arrest. To really understand how somebody like Tse Chi Lop even stepped onto that road, you have to slide back into the 1960s inside mainland China, where politics turned daily life upside down. During the movement called the Cultural Revolution, Chairman Mao Zedong encouraged radical youth groups to attack institutions that once held society together. Schools across cities such as Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Chongqing, plus dozens of provincial towns closed their doors while students joined political campaigns called struggle sessions. Millions of teenagers entered street movements known as Red Guards, which initially targeted teachers, officials, intellectuals, along with anyone labeled politically suspicious. Once those campaigns spread across provinces, transportation collapsed, factories slowed production, government offices froze operations, leaving countless young people drifting without education, employment, or supervision. As political energy faded during the early 1970s, many former militants carried street discipline into underground hustles that slowly formed criminal circles across southern China. That shift quietly produced networks investigators later called the Big Circle Boys, though early members never treated themselves as a traditional triad society. Instead of rigid hierarchies like older Hong Kong groups such as 14K or Sun Yi On, these crews operated through friendship ties built during revolutionary youth movements. Members trusted each other after years of marching together through chaotic political campaigns, which meant loyalty existed before crime even entered the conversation. During the late 1970s, many participants began leaving mainland China through Hong Kong or Macau, searching for opportunities outside a country still recovering from political upheaval. Once those migrants landed in cities like Vancouver, Toronto, Sydney, plus San Francisco, their connections transformed into transnational hustling networks, moving money, people, electronics, and sometimes narcotics. Law enforcement reports from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police later described these groups as extremely flexible crews, capable of switching criminal activities faster than many established mafia families. While those networks expanded across overseas Chinese communities, another piece of the story started quietly in southern China, where Tse Chi Lop entered the world in 1963. His birthplace, Guangzhou, sat along major trade routes linking mainland markets with Hong Kong's powerful port economy. That location meant smuggling existed long before modern drug empires developed, since merchants constantly moved electronics, fabrics, cigarettes, gold, plus other restricted goods across nearby borders. Public information about Chi Lop's childhood remains limited, though investigators studying his history believe early exposure to cross-border trading culture influenced how he later viewed risk. During the mid-80s, many young men from Guangdong traveled abroad chasing economic chances, which opened pathways into immigrant communities, where big circle connections already operated. Those diaspora neighborhoods formed a natural landing zone for anyone carrying relationships tied to underground networks stretching between China, Hong Kong, Southeast Asia, plus North America. By the time Chi Lop reached adulthood, Southeast Asia already hosted one of the world's most important narcotics production zones, known as the Golden Triangle. For decades, as heroin laboratories inside northern Myanmar relied on opium grown across mountain villages controlled by militias, warlords, plus armed ethnic factions resisting central government authority. Traffickers transported refined heroin through Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, eventually reaching Hong Kong shipping hubs where international brokers connected suppliers with global buyers. Investigators later suspected Chi Lop studied these smuggling channels early, learning how geography, corruption, plus transportation networks shaped the flow of narcotics through Asia. That knowledge mattered since logistics often determined success within organized crime far more than street-level violence or flashy displays of power. People who watched Chi Lop during those early years noticed he preferred conversations inside restaurants or hotels rather than loud confrontations on crowded streets. Law enforcement intelligence collected decades later often described him as unusually calm for somebody operating within criminal circles known for sudden violence. Associates said he rarely raised his voice during negotiations, choosing patient discussions that slowly brought rival groups toward mutual profit. Such behavior created respect among different gangs who normally distrusted outsiders, particularly within communities where reputation traveled quickly across immigrant neighborhoods. Instead of building dominance through intimidation, Chi Lop focused on relationships linking smugglers, distributors, transport specialists, plus financiers across several continents. That habit slowly positioned him as a bridge connecting separate crime groups who previously competed against each other across the Asia-Pacific markets. Years later, investigators studying the Sam Gor organization realized those early relationship-building skills formed the backbone of an empire worth billions. The story slowly moves from southern China toward North America during the late 1980s, which is where the next important chapter in Tse Chi Lop's life begins to unfold. In 1988, he relocated to Toronto together with his fiancée, entering Canada through the same immigration wave that brought thousands of Chinese migrants searching for economic stability. Once he settled in the city, records later showed he held routine jobs with imaging companies, including Fujifilm and Eastman Kodak, which placed him inside the ordinary rhythm of immigrant working life. Friends who interacted with the couple during those early years described a quiet household raising 2 children while living within multicultural neighborhoods scattered across the greater Toronto area. To most neighbors, the man looked like another newcomer, balancing family responsibilities, employment schedules, plus the long process of establishing a life in a foreign country. While that surface picture appeared routine, the environment surrounding Toronto during the late 1980s carried a far more complicated reality beneath everyday routines. The city had become one of North America's busiest gateways for Asian migration, which also meant several criminal groups arrived with members connected to overseas underworld networks. Vietnamese street gangs, Phucanese groups, plus traditional Hong Kong triad organizations began carving influence across immigrant districts that stretched from Scarborough toward downtown neighborhoods. Violence occasionally erupted between rival crews during daylight hours, especially near restaurants, karaoke bars, or gambling houses, where disputes over territory sometimes escalated quickly. Canadian police agencies, such as the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, along with the Toronto Police Service, documented several shootings linked to Asian organized crime through the late 1980s. That atmosphere meant anyone moving within these circles needed negotiation skills, patience, plus an understanding of how different groups operated across cultural boundaries. During that same period, the loose network known as the Big Circle Boys recognized that Canada offered strategic opportunities that stretched far beyond local gang disputes. Financial regulations allowed money to move through banks with fewer barriers compared with many Asian jurisdictions, which gave traffickers a convenient place to wash profits generated overseas. Canada also shared the world's longest undefended border with the United States, meaning goods crossing south could reach enormous markets within hours of leaving Ontario. Major shipping ports located in Vancouver, Montreal, plus Halifax, provide maritime connections linking Asia, Europe, and North American trade routes, moving cargo every single day. Those advantages encouraged Big Circle associates to treat Canada less as a street battleground, while viewing it instead as a logistical platform supporting larger criminal ventures. Gradually, the group began assembling a narcotics pipeline capable of transporting heroin sourced from Southeast Asia through Canadian territory toward American cities. As those operations expanded, investigators later concluded that Chi Lop played a quiet yet meaningful role in discussions shaping how these smuggling routes function. His background within diaspora communities allowed him to communicate comfortably with multiple groups who normally distrusted outsiders entering their business. That ability to navigate conversations across languages, cultural habits, plus criminal hierarchies made him increasingly useful when disputes threatened partnerships between different organizations. Over time, several people involved in the trade began recognizing him as someone capable of smoothing tensions before arguments disrupted profitable ventures. Word slowly traveled across networks that this calm individual could sit inside a room with rival figures, listen carefully, then find arrangements acceptable to everyone involved. Such a reputation placed him in a position where larger alliances could begin forming around cross-border drug distribution. One of the most consequential partnerships emerging during this era involved contact between Asian traffickers operating in Canada and the powerful Italian syndicate controlling parts of Montreal's underworld. That organization, widely known as the Rizzuto crime family, maintained long-standing smuggling channels extending into the United States through relationships built with American mafia families. According to later investigative reporting, Chi Lop helped facilitate introductions between big circle figures seeking reliable transportation routes and Italian operators already moving contraband across North American borders. Through those arrangements, heroin shipments could travel from Asian suppliers into Canada before continuing south along networks previously used for cigarettes, alcohol, plus other illicit cargo. Distribution pipelines stretched towards cities such as New York, while additional loads continued toward markets in Florida, where organized crime groups controlled local street sales. The cooperation generated profits for every group participating in the chain, which naturally increased Chi Lop's importance within those circles. As these connections matured during the early 1990s, authorities began noticing unusual patterns appearing within narcotics cases spanning several jurisdictions. Heroin seizures occurring in the United States sometimes trace their origin back to shipments first entering Canada through contacts linked to Asian networks. Investigators studying those incidents started mapping relationships between individuals appearing repeatedly in intelligence reports across Toronto, Montreal, plus American border regions. Within that developing picture, the name Tse Chi Lop surfaced quietly in conversations describing negotiations rather than violent enforcement activity. Officers later noted that he rarely appeared in street-level incidents involving weapons or visible intimidation tactics. Instead, his influence seemed to revolve around arranging meetings, managing trust between partners, plus coordinating logistical details, moving drugs across long distances. Those skills gradually elevated him beyond the role of ordinary trafficker, positioning him as a connector linking multiple criminal worlds into one expanding network. As the heroin pipeline stretching through Canada continued expanding during the early 1990s, investigators within the United States started noticing unusual trafficking patterns appearing across multiple federal cases. Shipments seized in cities such as Seattle, Los Angeles, plus New York, frequently pointed back toward supply chains entering North America through Canadian territory before traveling south. Agents within the Federal Bureau of Investigation began comparing intelligence reports with Canadian authorities, which gradually revealed overlapping suspects tied to Asian smuggling circles operating inside Toronto and Vancouver. This growing suspicion eventually pushed American agents to coordinate directly with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, since investigators believed a transnational trafficking structure was moving heroin from Southeast Asia through Canada into United States markets. Once that cooperation began, the two agencies launched a joint investigation known as Operation Sunblock, aiming to expose the people controlling these supply routes. As Operation Sunblock expanded through the mid-1990s, investigators relied heavily on wiretaps, financial tracing, plus long-term surveillance targeting suspected traffickers connected to Asian criminal networks. Phone intercepts gradually exposed conversations discussing shipments traveling between Hong Kong, Vancouver, Toronto, and then onward into American cities, where distributors handled street-level sales. Surveillance teams followed several suspects across airports, restaurants, hotels, plus residential neighborhoods where meetings often occurred behind ordinary-looking storefront businesses. Through those methods, authorities slowly pieced together how the heroin trade flowed through layers of brokers, transport coordinators, plus financial facilitators managing profits across borders. During those investigations, Tse Chi Lop appeared repeatedly in communications describing negotiations between different trafficking partners rather than direct handling of narcotics shipments. That pattern suggested he played a coordinating role, linking individuals operating in separate countries who relied on trust built through earlier criminal relationships. By 199, 8 investigators believed they gathered enough evidence connecting key figures inside the trafficking structure, which pushed authorities toward making arrests designed to disrupt the entire network. During that same year, Chi Lop traveled to Hong Kong, where he was reportedly dining inside a restaurant when officers from the Hong Kong police force approached him and placed him under arrest. The detention occurred following intelligence requests shared between American investigators and Hong Kong authorities, cooperating within Operation Sunblock. After several legal procedures, Chi Lop faced extradition to the United States, where prosecutors prepared charges connected to a heroin trafficking conspiracy spanning multiple jurisdictions. That transfer marked the first major collapse within the trafficking network that investigators had spent years quietly mapping through surveillance operations. Once Chi Lop arrived in American custody, federal prosecutors brought the case before a United States court, presenting evidence gathered through wiretaps, informants, plus financial tracking during Operation Sunblock. Facing the possibility of life imprisonment under federal narcotics laws, Chi Lop eventually entered a guilty plea, acknowledging participation in a heroin trafficking conspiracy. During sentencing proceedings, he appealed to the court for leniency, explaining that imprisonment would separate him from his family, including his children living in Canada. Despite those arguments, the judge imposed a sentence of 9 years inside the federal prison system, concluding that the scale of the narcotics operation required substantial punishment. That decision removed Chi Lop from the trafficking world for nearly a decade, while authorities believed the network itself had suffered a serious blow. Chi eventually entered the federal correctional system, where he was transferred to Federal Correctional Institution Elkton, a medium-security prison located in the state of Ohio. Within that facility, he encountered another inmate named Lee Chung-chak, who shared a similar experience navigating Asian criminal markets. Conversations between the two men reportedly shifted away from past heroin routes toward examining how global drug demand was beginning to change during the late 1990s. While heroin once dominated trafficking markets across many countries, law enforcement pressure plus shifting consumer preferences gradually altered the narcotics economy. Synthetic substances such as methamphetamine started appearing more frequently within seizures across East Asia, Southeast Asia, plus Pacific markets, where new production techniques allowed laboratories to manufacture drugs without relying on opium crops. As those discussions continued inside prison walls, both men recognized that synthetic narcotics could reshape the entire business model previously centered around heroin distribution. Methamphetamine laboratories required chemical precursors instead of agricultural harvest cycles, which meant production could expand rapidly once supply chains were established. That difference allowed traffickers to produce enormous quantities in controlled facilities located inside remote areas protected by armed militias or corrupt officials. While serving his sentence, Chi Lop studied these developments closely, realizing that future trafficking empires might revolve around industrial-scale synthetic drug manufacturing rather than traditional opium-based trade. By the time he approached the end of his prison term, that understanding had already begun forming the blueprint for a new criminal enterprise far larger than anything he previously managed. When Tse Chi Lop completed his federal sentence in 2006, prison officials released him from custody after nearly a decade inside the American correctional system. Records indicate he stepped out under conditions connected to post-sentence supervision, which normally required authorities to monitor movements, employment status, plus travel activity. Yet shortly after that release, investigators within American agencies discovered something unusual happened, since Chi Lop quietly slipped away from direct oversight without drawing immediate attention. By the time authorities attempted routine follow-ups connected to supervision requirements, the man they once tracked through Operation Sunblock had already vanished from their radar. That disappearance did not involve dramatic escapes or public incidents, since he simply moved quietly through international travel routes before surveillance systems recognized the shift. Once investigators realized he no longer appeared inside American monitoring databases, intelligence units began searching immigration records to determine where he might have traveled after leaving the United States. Those checks eventually suggested his trail led back toward Asia, where several cities maintained deep connections with Chinese diaspora business networks operating across finance, shipping, entertainment, plus underground economies. Among the locations repeatedly mentioned in intelligence discussions were Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, which all hosted communities where organized crime groups maintained long-standing influence. Each of those territories carried established triad organizations controlling gambling houses, loan sharking networks, smuggling operations, plus narcotics distribution channels stretching across Asia-Pacific markets. By reconnecting with figures inside those circles, Chi Lop quietly returned to an environment where alliances often formed through shared history rather than formal membership structures. During the late 2000s, those criminal ecosystems were also experiencing major changes within the narcotics economy, spreading across East Asia. Law enforcement pressure against heroin routes increased across Southeast Asia, while new substances began appearing in nightlife districts across Tokyo, Seoul, Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur, plus Australian coastal cities. Methamphetamine laboratories operating inside northern Myanmar started producing huge quantities of crystalline drugs known locally as ice, which traffickers could manufacture without relying on seasonal opium harvests. That shift meant the business model controlling narcotics supply chains had begun evolving toward industrial-style production systems built around chemical precursors rather than agricultural crops. Observers who later examined Chi Lop's movements during this period concluded he quickly recognized how those changes created opportunities for a completely different trafficking structure. Instead of rebuilding heroin channels previously disrupted by international investigations, Chi Lop focused attention on methamphetamine production networks already expanding within parts of Southeast Asia. Synthetic narcotics offered several advantages compared with traditional opium-derived drugs, since manufacturing processes could run continuously inside laboratories hidden in mountainous territory or remote jungle areas. Chemical ingredients required for production cost far less than maintaining large agricultural plantations, while distribution networks could move compact packages containing extremely potent products across long distances. Demand for these substances continued rising in nightlife districts, entertainment venues, plus urban drug markets across East Asia, where young consumers increasingly preferred stimulants over opiates. By studying those trends, Chi Lop gradually reshaped his strategy around methamphetamine supply chains capable of serving a massive regional market. Yet building a large-scale trafficking enterprise across Asia required cooperation between multiple criminal groups controlling territory, transportation routes, financial channels, plus local distribution networks. Rather than competing against existing organizations, Chi Lop began connecting leaders from several influential groups whose interests often overlapped within the narcotics economy. Among those groups were the Big Circle Boys network emerging from mainland Chinese migrants, alongside established triad societies such as 14K, Sun Yi On, plus Wo Xing Wo. At the same time, connections extended toward Taiwan through alliances involving figures tied to the Bamboo Union, which controlled networks across entertainment districts along with international smuggling channels. Those discussions slowly created a coalition that united multiple syndicates around one common purpose, which focused on large-scale methamphetamine production and distribution. Over time, investigators studying the structure of this alliance began describing it as an organized consortium rather than a single traditional crime family. Participants within the network often referred to the coalition using the Chinese term Sam Gor, which loosely translated into English as Brother Number 3, a nickname widely associated with Chi Lop himself. Law enforcement agencies across several countries later adopted another name for the organization, while analyzing intelligence reports describing its corporate-style coordination. Within those reports, the coalition became known as the Company, reflecting how it functioned through logistical planning, supply management, plus financial systems resembling multinational business operations. By the early 2010s, authorities across the Asia-Pacific regions suspected this emerging organization had already become one of the largest synthetic drug syndicates operating anywhere in the world. Once investigators across Asia began mapping the structure behind Sam Gor operations, they realized the organization functioned less like a traditional gang while resembling a coordinated business network stretching across several continents. Intelligence assessments produced by agencies such as the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime describe the group as operating through layered management roles similar to those used inside multinational corporations. At the top level, figures associated with Tse Chi Lop acted like executive decision-makers who guided strategy, negotiated partnerships, plus approved major shipments moving through regional routes. Beneath that leadership structure sat coordinators responsible for supervising distribution zones, while logistics planners organized transportation schedules between manufacturing sites, maritime ports, plus destination markets. Financial specialists handled money movement through shell companies, casinos, cryptocurrency channels, plus informal banking systems that transferred profits without drawing immediate regulatory attention. Because this system relied on coordination across multiple territories, Sam Gor required a reliable source capable of producing massive quantities of methamphetamine without interruption. Investigators soon focused attention on remote areas of northeastern Myanmar where the drug economy thrived inside territory controlled by armed ethnic militias rather than central government forces. Within that region lay Shan State, which had long served as a center for heroin laboratories before traffickers began converting facilities toward synthetic drug manufacturing. Inside jungle valleys, plus mountainous compounds hidden far from major highways, technicians operated industrial-scale methamphetamine laboratories that produced crystalline product around the clock. Those facilities often received protection from militia groups who controlled the surrounding territory, which allowed chemists to work without immediate interference from national law enforcement authorities. As long as laboratories continued producing, Sam Gor maintained the steady supply required to dominate methamphetamine markets across the Asia-Pacific regions, while production formed the backbone of the enterprise. Chi Lop introduced another business practice that investigators later described as unusual within the narcotics world. Distributors purchasing shipments from the organization received a guarantee that protected them against financial loss when authorities seized the product during transportation. If police intercepted a load somewhere along the supply chain, the cartel promised to replace that shipment at no additional cost to the buyer. This policy encouraged dealers across several countries to choose Sam Gor suppliers instead of competing networks that offered no protection against seizures. By reducing the financial risk faced by wholesalers, the cartel created a system where partners remained loyal, even when law enforcement occasionally disrupted shipments. That arrangement strengthened long-term relationships across distribution networks since traffickers knew the organization valued consistent cooperation over short-term profit. Once the product left the laboratories hidden inside Myanmar, a complex transportation system moved the drugs toward international markets through carefully planned routes. Traffickers frequently concealed methamphetamine inside packages labeled as green tea, using ordinary commercial branding that allowed shipments to blend with legitimate exports moving through Southeast Asian ports. Containers carrying these disguised loads often traveled through coastal shipping hubs located in Thailand before continuing toward maritime routes connecting major trading centers. Other shipments passed through distribution points inside Vietnam or Malaysia, where cargo traffic moved continuously through busy harbors handling global trade. By routing narcotics through several different countries before reaching final destinations, the cartel made it difficult for investigators to trace supply chains back to original production sites. The final stage of the operation depended on partnerships with organized crime groups already controlling street-level distribution within different regions of the world. In Japan, the cartel relied on connections with the Yakuza, whose long-established networks handled drug distribution alongside gambling, construction, plus financial rackets across urban centers. Within Australia, shipments often reached biker gangs, including organizations linked to outlaw motorcycle clubs that dominated portions of the country's methamphetamine market. Additional partners existed among Chinese diaspora gangs operating across cities in Canada and the United States, where immigrant communities sometimes provided cover for underground trafficking activity. Each partner handled local sales, while Sam Gor maintained control over wholesale supply flowing through international routes connecting producers with distributors. By coordinating these different elements together, the cartel gradually built an operational system that resembled a global supply chain rather than a simple gang enterprise. Production laboratories supplied enormous quantities of methamphetamine. Logistics teams moved shipments through international ports, and then regional partners handled street-level sales within their territories. Intelligence reports compiled by law enforcement agencies across the Asia-Pacific regions estimated that this structure eventually controlled somewhere between 40 and 70% of the region's methamphetamine trade. That level of influence meant Sam Gor effectively shaped the flow of synthetic drugs, reaching cities from Tokyo to Sydney, while maintaining headquarters spread across multiple countries. For investigators attempting to dismantle the network, the challenge involved confronting a decentralized organization whose structure mirrored modern multinational corporations operating within the legitimate global economy. While intelligence agencies across Asia spent years trying to understand the structure behind the Sam Gor network, the man believed to coordinate much of that activity continued to maintain an unusually quiet public presence. Unlike many figures connected with international narcotics empires, Tse Chi Lop rarely appeared in photographs linked to criminal investigations or media coverage discussing organized crime. Witness accounts collected from business associates described a man who preferred casual clothing, often wearing simple shirts, light jackets, or ordinary trousers while meeting partners inside restaurants or hotel lounges. That understated approach allowed him to move through international cities without drawing attention, which helped preserve anonymity even while authorities across several countries attempted to track his movements. Because he avoided public displays of wealth commonly associated with cartel leaders, many people interacting with him socially never suspected they were speaking with a man suspected of coordinating a massive narcotics enterprise. Despite that quiet personal image, investigators later discovered he spent considerable time inside high-end entertainment districts scattered across Asia's most famous gambling centers. Surveillance reports from multiple agencies mention frequent visits to casino floors within Macau, where international gamblers regularly wager millions inside luxury gaming halls. Macau's gaming industry attracted wealthy visitors from mainland China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, plus Southeast Asia, creating an environment where high-stakes gambling occurred almost every night of the year. Intelligence summaries also linked Chi Lop to occasional appearances inside resort complexes located in Singapore, where integrated resorts combined casinos with five-star hotels, restaurants, shopping districts, plus entertainment venues. Several investigative reports claim that during one gambling session, he allegedly lost tens of millions of dollars in a single evening, although exact figures remain difficult to confirm through public court documents. Whether those numbers were exaggerated or accurate, the stories reinforced an image of enormous financial resources circulating around his private life. Alongside these gambling trips, individuals familiar with his travel habits described a lifestyle that relied heavily on private aviation, luxury hotels, plus carefully arranged security. Investigators reported that he sometimes traveled with bodyguards trained in Thai kickboxing, providing protection during meetings with partners operating within the narcotics supply chain. Such security arrangements were common among high-level figures involved in organized crime across Southeast Asia, where personal safety often depended on trusted fighters capable of responding quickly during unexpected confrontations. Business discussions between Sam Gor associates frequently took place inside high-end resorts located in cities such as Bangkok, Phuket, Hong Kong, or Taipei, since those locations offered privacy alongside luxury amenities. These settings allowed participants to hold extended meetings about logistics, finances, plus shipment planning, while blending into environments filled with wealthy tourists and business travelers. Over time, a mixture of verified reports, rumors, plus underworld gossip began surrounding Chi Lop's personal life, gradually shaping the mythology attached to his name across criminal circles. Some accounts described extravagant private parties hosted inside luxury villas or penthouse suites, where influential figures from various countries gathered for celebrations lasting several days. Other stories suggested he occasionally donated money toward community projects or charitable causes, although investigators rarely found reliable documentation confirming such claims. Additional rumors circulated about secret investments placed within legitimate businesses across Asia, including real estate developments, entertainment companies, or international trading firms. Many of these stories remained impossible to verify through official investigations, which left them drifting between speculation and reality within conversations about the Sam Gor empire. Regardless of their accuracy, those narratives strengthened the legend surrounding Brother Number 3, reinforcing the image of a quiet strategist whose influence reached far beyond ordinary criminal networks. As the Sam Gor network expanded through the early 2010s, law enforcement agencies across Asia began reporting a sharp increase in methamphetamine seizures appearing within regional drug enforcement statistics. Authorities monitoring narcotics activity in countries across East Asia noticed shipments arriving with unusual frequency, while the purity of seized product remained consistently high. Intelligence summaries compiled by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime described a regional market suddenly flooded with crystalline methamphetamine, often referred to as ice. Laboratories operating within northern Myanmar continued producing massive quantities, which traffickers transported along routes stretching toward major cities across the Asia-Pacific region. As supply expanded, seizures recorded by police agencies rose dramatically in countries including Thailand, where authorities intercepted shipments moving through border provinces connected to trafficking corridors. Similar reports appeared in Japan, where organized crime groups distributed methamphetamine within urban nightlife districts. The same pattern soon appeared inside other countries located along Pacific trade routes, where synthetic drugs reached consumers through local criminal networks. Law enforcement officials in South Korea recorded increasing seizures connected to distribution rings importing methamphetamine concealed inside cargo shipments. Investigators also observed rising cases linked to narcotics arriving in Australia, where authorities repeatedly intercepted shipments hidden within commercial freight containers. These seizures confirmed what analysts already suspected about the scale of the network operating behind the supply chain. Instead of small trafficking groups moving isolated shipments, investigators faced a highly coordinated organization capable of delivering massive quantities of synthetic drugs across several continents. Among all those markets, Australia soon became one of the most lucrative destinations for traffickers connected with Sam Gor operations. Analysts studying global drug prices noted that methamphetamine sold at exceptionally high street values within Australian cities compared with markets in Asia or North America. A single kilogram of crystalline methamphetamine could command prices reaching hundreds of thousands of dollars once it reached urban distributors inside cities such as Sydney, Melbourne, or Brisbane. That enormous markup created a powerful financial incentive, encouraging traffickers to focus shipments toward Australian ports despite the country's strict border controls. As long as even a portion of the cargo reached distributors, profits remained large enough to justify the risk involved in long-distance smuggling. Because of those economics, investigators believed Australia became one of the cartel's most profitable territories within its international distribution system. While traffickers concentrated on profits, the flood of methamphetamine created serious social consequences across many countries affected by the trade. Police agencies in multiple jurisdictions began reporting rising levels of crime linked to stimulant addiction, including property theft, violent incidents, plus drug-related arrests appearing in urban communities. Hospitals across Southeast Asia and the Pacific region also observed increasing numbers of patients suffering health complications associated with long-term methamphetamine use. Medical professionals described cases involving severe psychological distress, cardiovascular problems, plus neurological damage caused by prolonged exposure to the drug. Families affected by addiction experienced disruption within households as relatives struggled with dependency that often required extended treatment programs. Those patterns appeared repeatedly in public health data collected across countries confronting the expanding methamphetamine market. As governments struggled to respond to these problems, international investigators continued examining the organization believed to be coordinating much of the supply flowing through the Asia-Pacific drug markets. Analysts working with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime reviewed intelligence from multiple law enforcement agencies while estimating the financial scale behind the network. According to those assessments, the organization known as Sam Gor may have generated annual revenues ranging between $8 billion and $17 billion. That level of income placed the syndicate among the largest drug trafficking organizations ever documented by international authorities. For investigators studying the phenomenon, the numbers confirmed that the cartel had evolved into a powerful force shaping the global synthetic drug economy. As methamphetamine seizures increased across Asia-Pacific markets, Australian investigators began noticing patterns suggesting a coordinated supply chain rather than isolated trafficking groups moving drugs independently. Analysts within the Australian Federal Police spent several years reviewing intelligence connected to narcotics shipments intercepted along the country's coastline. By around 2011, investigators suspected a powerful syndicate controlled a large portion of the methamphetamine arriving in Australia through maritime smuggling routes. Instead of launching immediate arrests targeting street-level dealers, the AFP initiated a long-term strategy designed to identify the organization coordinating shipments from overseas production centers. That strategy became known as Operation Congor, which focused on mapping supply chains rather than disrupting individual deliveries too early. Through that approach, investigators hoped to expose the leadership controlling the entire network instead of merely removing low-level traffickers. During the early phases of Operation Congor, Australian agents began carefully monitoring seizures occurring at ports, airports, plus coastal cargo facilities, where narcotics occasionally surfaced during routine inspections. Each time authorities intercepted a shipment of methamphetamine, analysts recorded details about packaging methods, shipping routes, container numbers, plus individuals connected to transportation. Over time, these records revealed unusual patterns appearing across different cases, separated by geography, yet connected through identical trafficking techniques. Several shipments concealed inside tea packaging or commercial freight containers carried chemical signatures suggesting they originated from the same production facilities. Intelligence officers soon realized that whenever authorities intercepted a load, another shipment frequently appeared within weeks using nearly identical smuggling methods. That pattern raised an important question for investigators studying the network. The rapid replacement of seized narcotics suggested the organization behind the shipments possessed enormous production capacity, along with a steady supply chain capable of absorbing losses. Instead of suffering financial setbacks after enforcement actions, traffickers seemed confident enough to send new shipments almost immediately following previous seizures. Investigators within Operation Congor concluded that such behavior indicated the presence of a centralized supplier capable of guaranteeing replacement deliveries to distributors. This unusual pattern mirrored the replacement policy that intelligence agencies had previously associated with Sam Gor operations across Southeast Asia. Each time law enforcement confiscated a load, another shipment appeared shortly afterward, confirming that someone at the top of the organization treated seizures as a routine cost of doing business. That insight strengthened the theory that one figure coordinated supply across the entire network. As investigators continued tracking communication between suspected traffickers, surveillance teams gradually focused attention on several individuals believed to be linked with the leadership structure of the syndicate. Intelligence sources eventually suggested that Tse Chi Lop might be operating somewhere within Southeast Asia while maintaining contact with multiple criminal partners across the region. For several years, authorities struggled to obtain direct confirmation of his location, since he moved frequently between cities using different travel documents and private transportation arrangements. The breakthrough arrived when surveillance teams learned about a gathering involving suspected associates scheduled to take place inside the resort city of Phuket. Investigators quietly positioned the observation teams near hotels and meeting venues where participants were expected to appear. During that operation, agents secretly photographed individuals entering the meeting location while comparing those images with passport records stored in international law enforcement databases. One photograph captured a man whose facial features strongly resembled those of the person authorities believed to be Tse Chi Lop. Analysts conducted biometric comparisons between the surveillance image and earlier identification photographs obtained from immigration files connected to his previous arrest. The facial recognition match strengthened the case significantly, since investigators finally possessed visual confirmation that the individual coordinating Sam Gor operations remained active within Southeast Asia. This moment marked the first time Operation Congor investigators could place Chi Lop physically within the network they had spent years analyzing. Once that confirmation circulated among partner agencies, Operation Congor expanded into a truly international investigation involving law enforcement organizations across several continents. Approximately 20 separate agencies eventually joined the effort as intelligence sharing increased between countries affected by methamphetamine trafficking linked to the Sam Gor network. Participants included the Australian Federal Police alongside the United States Drug Enforcement Administration, which had already encountered evidence connected to the group through earlier trafficking cases. Canadian investigators from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police also joined the investigation due to Chi Lop's earlier criminal activities in North America. Regional cooperation expanded further with assistance from the Royal Thai Police, along with law enforcement officials in Japan who monitored drug trafficking affecting their domestic markets. As collaboration increased, investigators began collecting massive quantities of digital evidence from devices seized during arrests connected to the wider trafficking network. Phones recovered from traffickers contained encrypted messaging conversations discussing shipment schedules, payment arrangements, plus contact details for associates located across several countries. Computers confiscated during raids revealed financial records showing large sums of money moving through shell companies designed to conceal profits generated by narcotic sales. Analysts working through Operation Congor compiled tens of thousands of pages of intelligence derived from emails, chat logs, bank transfers, plus travel records linking members of the organization together. Each new piece of evidence helped investigators map the internal structure connecting laboratories, transport coordinators, financial brokers, plus regional distributors operating within the syndicate. Over time, the evidence collected through Operation Congor gradually formed a detailed picture showing how the Sam Gor network operated under a coordinated leadership structure rather than scattered independent cells. Investigators traced communication chains connecting suppliers in Myanmar to logistics coordinators, moving shipments through Southeast Asian ports before reaching international markets. Financial records showed profits traveling through complex money laundering systems designed to obscure the identities of individuals controlling the enterprise. Surveillance reports documented meetings between suspected leaders who discussed production levels, shipping routes, plus partnerships with criminal groups responsible for local distribution. With every new document and intercepted message, authorities tightened their understanding of how the organization functioned under the direction of Tse Chi Lop. By the late 2010s, Operation Congor investigators believed they had assembled one of the most extensive intelligence files ever compiled against a transnational narcotics syndicate operating within the Asia-Pacific region. Thousands of surveillance hours, financial records, intercepted communications, plus witness testimonies pointed toward a centralized leadership figure coordinating the vast operation. That evidence gradually built the legal foundation required for international authorities to pursue arrest warrants capable of bringing the suspected leader before a court. Although the investigation required years of patience, investigators understood the case would only succeed if they targeted the individual believed to be guiding the entire network from behind the scenes. As Operation Congor moved into its final stages, attention focused increasingly on locating Tse Chi Lop and bringing the long hunt to a decisive conclusion. After nearly a decade of intelligence gathering through Operation Congor, investigators across several countries believed the case against Tse Chi Lop had finally reached a stage where an arrest could realistically succeed. Evidence gathered from surveillance operations, financial records, intercepted communications, plus witness testimony created a detailed map describing how the Sam Gor network operated across multiple continents. Australian authorities concluded that capturing the suspected leader required cooperation between several international partners capable of locating him during international travel. That opportunity eventually appeared in January 2021, when intelligence reports indicated that Chi Lop planned to pass through Schiphol Airport. Acting on information shared through Operation Congor, officers from the Dutch National Police prepared to intercept him once he arrived inside the terminal. When the moment arrived, investigators moved carefully in order to avoid alerting anyone who might assist him in leaving the airport before authorities could intervene. Chi Lop entered the terminal expecting to continue an international journey. Yet officers approached quietly before escorting him away from the boarding area without a dramatic confrontation. The arrest occurred following a request submitted by the Australian Federal Police, which had been leading Operation Congor's investigation into the Sam Gor network. Because the warrant originated from Australia, Dutch authorities placed Chi Lop into custody under international legal procedures, allowing one country to detain a suspect wanted by another jurisdiction. News of the arrest quickly spread through law enforcement circles across the Asia-Pacific regions, where investigators had spent years attempting to locate the man suspected of coordinating one of the world's largest synthetic drug operations. Although the arrest marked a major milestone for Operation Congor, the process of bringing Chi Lop before an Australian court required navigating complex legal procedures within the Netherlands. Once he entered Dutch custody, defense attorneys began preparing arguments designed to block his transfer to Australia under international extradition agreements. Lawyers representing Chi Lop argued that the charges presented by Australian prosecutors relied heavily on evidence gathered across several countries, which they claimed raised questions regarding jurisdiction and the reliability of certain investigative methods. The defense also raised concerns about the conditions surrounding potential imprisonment in Australia, suggesting that transferring him might violate certain legal protections guaranteed under European law. These arguments formed the basis of a prolonged legal battle inside Dutch courts, where judges examined whether the extradition request satisfied international legal standards. Over the course of more than a year, several hearings took place within the Dutch judicial system as lawyers representing both sides presented evidence and legal interpretations concerning the extradition requests. Prosecutors working with Australian authorities emphasized the scale of the narcotics network under investigation, while presenting intelligence demonstrating that methamphetamine shipments linked to Sam Gor had repeatedly entered Australian territory. Dutch judges carefully reviewed documentation describing Operation Congor's findings, along with the legal framework governing cooperation between the Netherlands and Australia in criminal cases. Throughout this process, Chi Lop remained detained while awaiting the outcome of proceedings, determining whether he would face trial in Australia. Eventually, Dutch courts concluded that the extradition request met the legal standards required for international cooperation in serious criminal investigations. That decision cleared the final legal barrier, preventing his transfer to Australian custody. Following the court ruling, arrangements began for transporting Chi Lop from Europe to Australia under the supervision of law enforcement officers responsible for ensuring the transfer complied with international security procedures. In December 2022, he boarded a flight escorted by officials who accompanied him throughout the journey from the Netherlands to Australia. Upon arrival, he landed in the city of Melbourne, where Australian authorities prepared to bring the long-running investigation into the courtroom. The transfer represented a significant achievement for investigators who had spent years tracking the suspected leader of the Sam Gor organization through multiple countries and legal systems. Once he arrived in Melbourne, the focus shifted from international pursuit toward preparing a criminal trial capable of presenting evidence before an Australian judge. As prosecutors assembled their case, they faced an unusual challenge related to the complexity of the international investigation that produced the evidence against Chi Lop. Operation Congor had uncovered vast amounts of intelligence describing the structure of the Sam Gor network, yet converting that intelligence into admissible courtroom evidence required careful legal preparation. Prosecutors ultimately concentrated on a specific conspiracy involving large shipments of methamphetamine connected to Australia rather than attempting to prove the full global scope of the organization. By focusing on identifiable shipments linked directly to Australian territory, legal teams aim to present a clear narrative supported by evidence that could withstand scrutiny in court. This strategy avoided relying too heavily on intelligence gathered through international surveillance operations that might prove difficult to introduce within formal legal proceedings. During hearings connected to the case, prosecutors described how the investigation linked Chi Lop to a trafficking conspiracy responsible for coordinating methamphetamine shipments moving through Southeast Asia toward Australian markets. Evidence presented in court included communication records between suspected associates, financial transactions connected to trafficking activities, plus intelligence reports compiled by agencies participating in Operation Congor. Defense attorneys challenged several aspects of this evidence while arguing that the prosecution relied too heavily on interpretations of communication between individuals rather than direct proof of leadership over the organization. Throughout the proceedings, both sides presented competing interpretations regarding Chi Lop's role within the broader trafficking network described by investigators. These courtroom debates reflected the difficulty of prosecuting a figure accused of coordinating an international enterprise operating through multiple intermediaries across several countries. After months of legal proceedings examining evidence and arguments presented by both sides, the court eventually reached a conclusion regarding the charges against Tse Chi Lop. In December 2025, an Australian judge delivered the final decision in the case brought against him following his extradition from the Netherlands. The court sentenced Chi Lop to 16 years in prison after finding him responsible for participating in a major drug trafficking conspiracy connected to methamphetamine shipments targeting Australian markets. Under Australian sentencing guidelines, he will become eligible for parole after serving a portion of that term, although the exact timeline depends on several legal factors connected to parole eligibility. The sentence represented one of the most significant outcomes produced by Operation Congor after years of investigation involving agencies across multiple countries. Despite the conviction, the outcome sparked debate among investigators who had spent years pursuing the leader of the Sam Gor network. Some law enforcement officials expressed satisfaction that the case finally brought one of the world's most influential narcotics traffickers into custody after decades of criminal activity spanning several continents. Other observers noted that the sentence addressed only a portion of the wider operation believed to have generated billions of dollars in revenue across Asia-Pacific drug markets. Those discussions highlighted the complicated reality of prosecuting transnational organized crime, where legal systems often struggle to address the full scale of international networks. Even so, the arrest, extradition, and sentencing of Tse Chi Lop marked the culmination of one of the most extensive investigations ever conducted against a synthetic drug syndicate operating across the global narcotics trade. After the sentencing of Tse Chi Lop inside an Australian courtroom in December 2025, investigators across the Asia-Pacific regions began asking an important question about what truly changed within the global methamphetamine trade. While authorities successfully captured the man believed to coordinate the Sam Gor network, intelligence analysts understood that criminal organizations rarely collapse immediately after one leader enters prison. Drug markets tend to operate through layered systems involving producers, brokers, transport specialists, plus distributors who continue functioning even when one individual disappears. Because of that structure, several investigators involved in Operation Congor suggested that portions of the organization likely remained active despite the conviction of its most recognizable figure. The arrest removed a central coordinator, yet the broader machinery responsible for producing and distributing narcotics across multiple countries still existed within the shadows. Evidence supporting that concern appeared almost immediately after the conclusion of the trial, since narcotic seizures across Southeast Asia continued appearing in reports issued by regional law enforcement agencies. Many of those shipments contained methamphetamine resembling the product previously associated with laboratories operating inside northern Myanmar. Within that region, a remote territory located in Shan State remained largely controlled by armed militia groups rather than centralized government authorities. Those militias maintained complex relationships with trafficking organizations, sometimes protecting laboratories in exchange for financial payments or logistical support. Because political instability continues affecting large areas of Myanmar, law enforcement officials face enormous challenges attempting to dismantle production facilities hidden inside jungle terrain. As long as those laboratories remain active, the supply of synthetic drugs flowing through the Asia-Pacific markets is unlikely to disappear completely. When investigators reflected on the career of Tse Chi Lop, many concluded his influence extended beyond the specific crimes presented during the Australian trial. Unlike traditional cartel leaders who relied heavily on violence or public displays of power, he appeared to operate through careful coordination, negotiation, plus financial management resembling the practices used within legitimate multinational corporations. That approach allowed a decentralized network of producers, transport coordinators, plus distributors to function across several continents without drawing immediate attention from authorities. By blending criminal activity with business-style organization, the Sam Gor structure demonstrated how globalization created opportunities for organized crime to operate through international supply chains similar to those used by legitimate industries. In that sense, the story of Tse Chi Lop reflected a broader transformation occurring within the global narcotics trade during the early 21st century. Looking back at the moment inside Schiphol Airport where Dutch officers quietly placed handcuffs on a man passing through the terminal, it becomes clear that the arrest represented the end of one chapter within a much larger story. The individual standing against that wall once managed a criminal enterprise, generating billions of dollars while coordinating partners across several continents. His capture showed that international cooperation between law enforcement agencies can eventually reach even the most elusive figures operating within transnational crime networks. Yet, the systems developed during his rise continue moving product across oceans, ports, plus borders where demand for synthetic drugs remains strong. Somewhere within those supply chains, another strategist is probably studying the same blueprint, quietly preparing the next evolution of an enterprise that authorities around the world still struggle to contain.